Now,
Well, this one is clearly still current. Epstein is happening again, so it hasn't really gone away. I mean, the federal charges were dropped in his agreement, which was, according to the Miami Herald article, that was a much larger investigation. So it just kept it an in-state thing. I mean, and the larger international or definitely multi-state aspects of Epstein were never, made public as much.
One other point I wanted to make about his jail stay, and then we'll get back to the Miami Herald article in a second, is that the jail stay, one of his most frequent visitor to the jail, and remember, he was only there one full day. When he could get visit, why would anybody want to visit him there? One of his most frequent visitors was Jean-Luc Brunel. Jean-Luc Brunel.
Jean-Luc Brunel, the French director, right?
Oh, no. He's a French modeling scout.
Okay, Jean-Luc Brunel. Gotcha.
He's a modeling scout who was exposed on 60 Minutes for drugging and roofing these little teenage girls in his modeling scouting business. By the way,
was he associated with that other guy from Elite Modeling?
No.
Okay,
I just had Michael Gross on the show, okay? And he's the guy who wrote that article, and I think it was the Daily Beast. Michael Gross is a well-known guy in New York City. He's done a lot of gossip stuff like that, but he worked for the New York Times, and he's written some books about real estate and about the modeling business. And he wrote an article about Trump having these parties at Plaza Hotel, when he owned the Plaza Hotel with a bunch of teenage models there. And he was also involved, too, with that BBC documentary, Is Trump a Sex Pest? And I had two of the young models on my show who made allegations against Trump along the same lines, being hit on by Trump when they were 16 years old and offered drugs and alcohol and all kind of stuff. And even talked about Trump having a 17-year-old Haitian teenage model right around that same time. And there's been other things that have been going on in the background with this where I haven't gotten somebody on the show yet, but I've talked to him off the air. We've communicated off the air. We've offered to get them attorneys and stuff like that. Of other serious allegations of the same nature, not just of Trump, but of people around Trump. And
Gotcha.
By the way, talk about, since this Miami Herald article came on, everybody's talking about this now like it just suddenly happened. Donnie Deutsch, the well-dressed, dresses like a dandy, to quote Piers Resman, out there on Morning Joe, right, comes out and says, hey,
right.
I had contacts. I had a breakfast meeting with Jeffrey Epstein, and we were going to buy a publication. By the way, Epstein's involved in all these Radar Online and all these things. That other one that got shut down by Hulk Hogan, that other magazine.
Right, yes, I know exactly, yeah. All these online journalist stuff.
Gawker, I think it is.
Epstein, Gawker, yes. Yeah. Gawker lost, yeah.
Epstein's sending the money, bailing these guys out. Okay.
Well, you had said, I think with some of your reporting, you had said that it was Epstein's idea that the Clinton Foundation was created, right?
There's a 24-page letter. You can find it at OppermanReport.com in my member section for as little as $6 a month. And it's exclusive to me. I don't know anybody else that has this thing. People ask me for it all the time, so they can't be able to find it online. Where Jerry Lefcourt, who used to be Abby Hoffman's lawyer, who I met a few times back in New York City way back in the 80s, and now turned out to be one of Jeffrey Epstein's lawyers. And he wrote a letter to the prosecutors, part of their negotiations, where he claimed that Jeffrey Epstein was pivotal in the creation and the founding of the Clinton Foundation.
Wow. That's amazing.
I don't think Jerry Lefcourt would lie. Okay.
Gotcha. I didn't mean to take you off of the Jean-Luc Brunel, but we kind of got just led you off of that. But Jean-Luc Brunel visited Epstein the most while he was in jail, and he was a roofing 15-year-old girls, and some of them came forward right during the Me Too movement.
Oh, absolutely. They came forward. There was a whole 60 Minutes show about it, but you can't find it online anymore. It's disappeared.
Interesting.
But also, too, he visited Epstein more days than there were visiting days, meaning he visited him once, twice. Okay? Now, what were they? What kind of friendship did they have? What are they talking about? What could they be discussing? Jean-Luc Brunel had a reputation, too, as well, of these HB1 visas, that he had some kind of scam going on with these visas, that he could import these girls from all these Eastern European countries. They talk about Epstein having parties in Manhattan. This is all in publications. When he's had these parties in Manhattan, where suddenly a bunch of little 13, 14-year-old girls would come in dressed like hookers. They were Eastern European. How could you say no one knew about this? And this is New York City. It's been written about in New York Magazine. These kind of magazines.
It's just incredible. Have you ever heard the name Selena Jenkins? Or she's supposedly trafficking women from Eastern Europe as well. Have you heard her name?
And there's so many names. I don't know.
Jenkins. But it's just interesting that you brought up this Eastern European, because there's another woman who she has like meetings with the Pope, and she's friends with
Epstein. Epstein has a picture of the Pope. He has a picture of the Pope and a picture.
So you've never heard the name Jenkins in association with Epstein?
No, and there's a woman I've been dealing with named Jenkins. It's a real problem in my life. I would remember the name.
Okay, sorry. Well, she made a lot of money by salvaging, I think it was Barclays Bank. Really? She was an intermediary between Middle Eastern money and Barclays, and she made quite a bit of money. But she's kind of she's been involved in supposedly a lot of human trafficking from Eastern Europe, and she's Yugoslavian, or she's really Yugoslavian native. But she wrote this book called Room 23 that features a lot of Hollywood celebrities and kind of eyes wide shut gear and stuff like that. It's really weird.
Definitely try and book her for sure.
Well, good luck. I know. You can go look at her Instagram account, and it's pretty disturbing. But anyway, so...
But wait, by the way, real quick, Epstein, because I have the video of the search warrant execution of his Palm Beach mansion, which, by the way, the place was scrubbed before there. He had prior knowledge that there was going to be a raid. Then they cleaned the place out, because everybody talks about there being nude photos of teenage girls on his walls and frames. And you could see wires hanging from the ceiling and stuff like that, where there was video camera equipment and stuff that had been removed. So there's all that. But he has pictures of Castro and the Pope in frames.
Right, so he's like with them, right?
Yeah.
Like shaking hands, yeah.
And what's his name? Dershowitz, when he's trying to come up with his explanation of his association with Epstein, he says, "Well, I met Mr. Epstein at a party of Evelyn Rothschild's at her home."
Oh my God!
Okay, that's his,
And she's deep in Pizzagate. There's that picture of her with this guy from Media Matters, who was the boyfriend of James Alefantis. So it's a little kind of interesting little spider's web.
Oh, yeah. And Epstein's connected to everybody. Netanyahu and all these people, the president.
Right. Barack, who was the head, former prime minister of Israel, was on the black book for the so-called Lolita Express. And people who don't know, Epstein would fly to this island in, the Bahamas, or Little Bahamas, was it?
Virgin Islands.
Virgin Islands, sorry. And then he had some kind of weird Egyptian-inspired building on top with statuaries or statues, and then supposedly underneath that was a bunch of caverns, and that's where acts of depravity would occur. That there's been rumors involving other known names out there, people who are in the news today. So
well, don't forget too that the governor down there, that Virgin Islands, is the former NYPD cop was down there, and his wife is employed by Jeffrey Epstein down there.
So it's just they're just the tendrils are all through
but let's not get
Dershowitz himself, just so I can get this in. We talked about Virginia Roberts. She claimed that he raped her, right?
She claims that she was forced to have sex with Dershowitz, and that everything was so nonchalant that when she would be giving sex to Epstein, that he would just walk into the room and they would have conversations. Now, Dershowitz just came out recently and said that Jeffrey Epstein is still his client to this day.
Wow.
And he says, well, you know something, once you're a lawyer and you take on a client, you never really stop being their lawyer.
yeah, you can. That's not true. But there was another woman who came out and claimed Dershowitz abused her too, right? So he has had two.
Oh, no, I'm not familiar with that. What do you got there?
Okay, I thought that there was a second one. I'll have to look that up. But as an aside... So a well-known name, kind of an alternate media, is this guy Mike Cernovich, who got involved in the Epstein case, and he was raising money to file a motion to obtain information. But the way that he publicly said it is that his interest was in the public interest, but the actual motion, and you can read, this is actually a fascinating little piece of legality, because it was countered by David Boies, who is probably one of the top lawyers in the country, and he was involved in kind of all kinds of famous cases. What was it? Bush and Bush Gore, the vote recount. So Boies came in and put this other brief memo and showed that Cernovich's interest was not in the public interest. That was his argument, which I believe, that Cernovich was not in the public interest, but that he was trying to reveal or uncover these secretive names of abuse victims. And he was trying to do it for Dershowitz's benefit. So they were trying to uncover who some of these victims were, supposedly, allegedly. And the Boies' motion that they put in court, or the response, included pictures of Cernovich with Dershowitz. Yeah. And they're known to be friends. So there's this kind of odd thing that this guy, Mike Cernovich, is seen as this truth teller. But in this circumstance involved in the Epstein case, where in my understanding, he's portraying himself as a white knight, it's not the case according to David Boies.
I'm no follower of Cernovich or a fan of his or whatsoever. I don't know who, and I'm finding out more and more that all these alt-right wing guys, these Twitter characters, man, they're all being funded by Cambridge Analytica and that whole bunch, and the Mercers and the Kochs. More and more, I'm really seeing, my eyes are being opened to what's going on in this whole freaking quote-unquote alt media crap, you know. And I'm totally out of the loop, man. I'm here starving to death, limping around with my hernia here. And these other guys, Project Veritas, are sitting back in it, and Laura Loomer flying around the country.
Yeah, how is she affording? She went to South Africa. She's been all over the place.
These guys get a ton of funding. They
don't ever disclose it, which is a shame.
No, and they got all kinds of scams going on too behind the scenes. Anyway, not in general, these old media types raising funds for this and then kicking back the money to each other. From what I'm hearing and from what I've seen, I can testify if I had to. Let's see. There's so much.
So we got off. So we were talking about Dershowitz. We covered.
One thing is the recent lawsuits came out. Everyone was lamenting about, oh my goodness, they settled this lawsuit, and now these poor girls. This is after the Miami Herald article came out, and they settled these lawsuits. So now these girls will never get their voices, will never be heard. Boo hoo, boo hoo. But if people really look at that, that was a defamation lawsuit that everybody's happy with. Okay, all the plaintiffs are happy with that settlement. They got paid off. But that, if you go back, you're the one that tipped me off about this. That was the same gaggle, I guess you'd call it, of defamation lawsuits and bar complaints that all went back and forth between Brad Edwards and Dershowitz back then. Remember on a Friday night you sent me that? Yeah. And you said, hey, Friday night document dump to keep it out of the press. And it was Dershowitz with his press release about how he's backing out of this lawsuit and declaring victory in a way. But they all went on. They all continued. And that if Dershowitz would have stayed in, he would have lost too. He would have had to make a settlement too in that. So...
Right. I mean, there's just all kinds of
so much here,
flying around this whole whole Epstein situation.
Even Jean-Luc Brunel sued Epstein, saying that his name coming out and all this because he visited him 53 times in 1 year, more than there were weeks in a year. And he sued Epstein too. There's a lot of some of these are convenient lawsuits back and forth, just settlements and silencing each other and. But there's so much in this case that even I can't keep up with it all. And I've been talking about this before anybody. I don't want to toot my own horn or pat myself on the back, but it's just a fact, and there's just so much going on.
Right.
Here.
Nobody else in the alternative media really wants to even talk about Epstein. It's a very important case, super important, because of his ties all throughout everything. And everybody just denies it. Don't know.
Unless it's Clinton, unless they want to throw Clinton's name in there like a Liz Cronkin right away. It's a Clinton story. Hey, listen, I'm not saying the Clintons aren't perverts and they're not killers, they're not coke smugglers, they're not CIA. They are. They're a crime family. There's no doubt about that. And they're up to their necks and all this stuff like that. But so is everybody else. I don't think there's anybody left out of this case. You got Courtney Love and who's that guy? Chris Tucker are involved with this.
Chris Tucker, right. What's Chris Tucker in that group? Oh, my gosh.
Well, get this, man. The same flight, the way we found out about Epstein was because Bill Clinton hopped a flight to Africa on Epstein's plane with Chris Tucker, Kevin Spacey, and I think there was even a couple of porn stars on that flight. But the thing is, Chris Tucker has his own shenanigans. First of all, he has his own plane, too. They all do. Everybody named here got their own plane, and private planes. And if you've ever been around these private airports, a lot of shenanigans going on there.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Where do you think the drugs come into this country?
90% of them, flown around the country on private, especially now.
Private jets, yeah. These private jets is really the real transportation. They don't come through the major thoroughfares at all. It's a lot of private jets.
Yeah, especially now. In the old days, you could get, through the, with a coat full of money and stuff like that. You can't do that anymore.
Did you remember that there was a story of a famous Mexican Latino musician, and one of the planes went down, and it was like full of coke too. Oh yeah. So people, it was great.
Well, Trump's helicopter pilot was a coke dealer. That stuff goes on all over the place.
All over.
But what were we saying though before that?
Anyway, so just this how many different people are involved?
Oh yeah, Chris Tucker was involved with snatching up that kid Gavino. That Michael Jackson was molesting. When that thing came out in the press, Michael Jackson says, "Go get little Gavino, bring him to me." And Chris Tucker hops on his private plane and delivers this kid to Michael Jackson for his safety. because they're worried about this kid.
It's just